America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After nearly 4 decades of March Madness, this sports broadcasting legend is stepping away from his role in covering the NCAA basketball tournament. Jim Nantz on his fondest memories and what's next when we go person to person.
We will very loudly and proudly say not guilty.
No one should be above the law, but no one should be a target of the law.
This is nothing short of a political prosecution.
I was disturbed to hear the former president speak in the way he spoke about the district attorney Bragg. I would be mindful of not committing some other criminal offense like obstruction of governmental administration.
President Biden has yet to officially launch a re-election campaign.
I'm going to run for president of the United States. People want leaders that appeal to the best of America and not simply appeal to our worst instincts.
I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Thanks for joining us. Former President Trump has arrived in New York City, where he'll be expected to surrender to prosecutors on Tuesday. He traveled from his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida for the arraignment at the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. So joining us now, we have CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa, who's outside the Manhattan DA's office in New York City, and CBS News political director Finn Gomez, who's been following the president's departure earlier today in Palm Beach, Florida. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. We have the former president's route pretty much covered today. Bob, I want to start with you in New York. You have been camped out there for days. You've been reporting out there for days. Set the scene for what we are expecting tomorrow when we see for the first time in American history a former president being indicted. We understand that we're actually going to learn what these charges are that he's facing.
Good to be with you, Caitlin. So far, we know that the former president will arrive here sometime late morning, early afternoon on Tuesday to be processed at this building behind me, Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. He will not be in handcuffs, but he will be likely taking a photograph, a mug shot, and then he will be arraigned in open court. During that court proceeding, the indictment against Trump will be unsealed, so we will finally be able to see the specifics of what actually Trump is being accused of by the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Our reporting at CBS News shows that much of the street here will be shut down to let the former president's black SUVs come into this area on Tuesday. But for now, it's actually a relatively quiet scene here on Monday evening. Traffic is still flowing. Pedestrians are here, some protesters as well.
And Bob, I understand that Trump retained a new lawyer today. What do we know about him?
Trump's expanding his legal team, Caitlin, as he looks toward a possible trial. Trump's lawyers tell us they are going to move to dismiss this case, but should it not be dismissed and move toward a trial, he has brought on a veteran New York prosecutor, Todd Blanche, who has a lot of experience as a prosecutor in high-profile litigation, to be part of his legal team. Trump has almost several legal teams that are operating at this moment as he deals with Georgia, that election investigation, 2 special counsel investigations in Washington on the federal level, and, of course, everything playing out here in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, it's a really good reminder, Bob, that this is just one of several investigations going on at the same time. Finn, I want to talk to you about kind of the political implications of all of this, because I think that's been the biggest question, aside from what these charges are and what will happen with this indictment, is what this means for Trump politically, because he is running for president again. I want to play a little bit of what some of his rivals and potential rivals have been saying in response to this indictment.
I think the unprecedented indictment of a former president of the United States for a campaign finance issue is an outrage. And I think it's clear to the overwhelming majority of the American people that this is nothing short of a political prosecution.
He wants to downgrade felonies to misdemeanors, really, really dangerous stuff. And then what does he do? He turns around, does a flimsy indictment against a former president of the United States.
I want to be crystal clear that we should not want to live in a country where the party in power is able to use police force to arrest its political opposition.
So, Finn, we are seeing Republicans, come to Trump's defense, echo his sentiments about Bragg and the entire prosecution. But this seems like this moment in time. I mean, there is still a long way to go. What is kind of the longer term political impact potentially for this president, for this former president, and how is his team kind of thinking about that?
I think you're absolutely right, Caitlin. Right now, the political impact for Donald Trump and his 2024 candidacy has that it's been a boost, if you will. You've seen his rivals and potential rivals circle their wagons around the former president in this Manhattan DA case. However, I have spoken to Republican operatives and Republican strategists from other camps, those of whom who are not connected to the Trump world, and they say they don't believe it's sustainable, and that this right now in April of 2023 could change as we proceed forward into this cycle. There are looming investigations. There's a special counsel investigation on two fronts. There's, of course, Fulton County in Georgia, that investigation into election interference as well. And frankly, there's a sense that the increase, the boost, the political boost, if you will, among that diehard electorate, that the base voters within the Republican Party, that may wane as this goes on. That may not be sustainable politically as this goes on. And, and down the line, those voters may, appreciate the political policies of the former president, but they may look elsewhere for other potential candidates to lead them forward. Ron DeSantis, who is, of course, the governor of this state and who is a potential contender, is expected by many to jump into the fray following his legislative session after that ends early next month. And he could be a potential contender. As others have reported, as Bob himself has reported, there have been other potential contenders under consideration who could pick up that momentum as we go down the line. Caitlin?
Yeah, Finn, that's a really good point. Bob, I'm curious what you've been hearing, too, talking to your sources about kind of, how the other candidates or, the donor base or the Republican Party, operatives are kind of thinking about this, looking at this indictment, but also the other investigations going on as well that they could likely be concerned about.
This is a wait-and-see moment for many Republican donors, especially those who have an aversion to former President Trump. They're wondering, could the dynamics change? But right now, they're witnessing Trump consolidating support in the Republican primary race. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is not taking Trump on in any way. In fact, offering relative support. Other rivals being pretty muted and taking on Trump when he has a moment of potential legal vulnerability at the least, not sensing necessarily political vulnerability from Trump. Some donors are looking at whether someone like Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin could be courted to run. But my sources tell me that Youngkin's not making any moves to get into the 2024 race. You do have some sensing a bit of opportunity, like former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who jumped into the race on Sunday. But beyond that, Trump has so much sway with a lot of his own longtime supporters that it's hard at a moment of grievance on the legal and political front for any of his competitors to get much political oxygen.
Yeah, that's what I find so fascinating about the dynamic here is that you have, as you say, a Trump at his, at a very vulnerable point, and yet the gloves really haven't come off among the other candidates. I mean, you mentioned Hutchinson is pretty much the only one that's been offering some criticisms of Trump. I want to play a little bit about what he said in announcing his run. And Finn, get your thoughts on the other side.
I've traveled the country for 6 months. I hear people talk about the leadership of our country, and I'm convinced that people want leaders that appeal to the best of America and not simply appeal to our worst instincts.
But you couldn't see yourself supporting Trump again.
I don't believe he should be the next leader of our country.
So, at the same time, Finn, very few people, I think, know who Hutchinson is, and Donald Trump is still commanding a sizable portion of the base. Is there room for someone like him, or is he trying to just, make this point?
You know, I spoke to Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, the former head of the DEA, a couple weeks ago in Washington, D.C., where he shared that same sentiment, where he said that if Donald Trump is indicted, that he should step aside. And now that he's announced, he's reiterating that point and making it a central part of his emerging candidacy. I think there is space for that sort of sentiment, because you haven't really heard that before to that level. However, overall, Caitlin, if you look at those numbers that impact that he's had so far, the former governor of Arkansas hasn't registered among primary voters, among likely Republican voters. You haven't seen that. His name does not have that national recognition that others and others may have, and potential rivals to Donald Trump may have. So I think he has quite the uphill climb from this starting point. But, it is still early. We will see where he goes. But, as we mentioned, right now, the early front runner continues to be the former president, even with the historic arraignment occurring tomorrow in New York.
And I know you two are covering it all for us, and we'll see if any of those questions get answered tomorrow and in the months to come. Bob Costa and Finn Gomez, thank you so much for your time and reporting. And coming up, more details on how Donald Trump and his planned surrender in New York Tuesday will pan out. We'll look at the charges the former president may face. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today. I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, we're going to tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
I identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
And and welcome back to Red and Blue. Former President Trump is in New York City and will stay at Trump Tower this evening before heading to the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse Tuesday, where he will surrender and face charges. Sources told CBS News over the weekend Trump will be charged with falsifying business records in the first degree, which is a felony. But as of now, the charge or charges are still under seal. CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roife joins me now. Rebecca, good to see you. Thanks for being here. What else may be in this indictment? We understand there are about 34 charges.
So, Caitlin, thanks for having me on. It's nice to see you. Yeah, so it is reported that there are 34 charges, and we don't know what those charges are. So all of that conversation in the public and the media about what is going on with this in prosecution really won't become clear until we know specifically what those charges involve. So there could be multiple charges for each time there was a falsification of a business record. And there could also be multiple theories because, as we were saying before, when it's a misdemeanor charge, there needs to be a falsification of business records with an intent to defraud. But in order for that to be a felony charge, it would have to be that intent was also to commit or conceal another crime. So it's possible that there are multiple theories about what that crime is or could be that the president was seeking to commit or conceal by falsifying those records having to do with the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, and as we're all waiting for that, there has been so much attention put on Alvin Bragg, the DA here. Lots of criticism, of course, generated by former President Trump and his allies. But there's also been a question of why taking this case now, why he's moving forward with it. The former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara was on Face the Nation over the weekend. I want to play a little bit about his thoughts about why Bragg pursued this case, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
I can't, speculate as to why Cy Vance didn't bring the case or why my former office didn't bring the case, although there are some reasons to think maybe it was because they were concerned that Michael Cohen had not been fully forthcoming, and they have a policy of not putting on witnesses as cooperating witnesses if they haven't divulged everything about themselves and everyone else. That was a policy that was in place when I was the U.S. Attorney. So different policies, different legal considerations may be the reason why there's a divergence, but we don't know for sure.
Rebecca, I'm really curious about your opinion about all of this and why he, may be bringing this case now.
So I agree with Preet that it's impossible to know from our vantage point what happened in those internal discussions, why there was some sort of delay and why it was picked up again. But I will say something about this falsification of business records charge in New York. It's kind of the bread and butter of what the DA's office does. It's the way in which Manhattan prosecutors have historically held those in power, particularly white-collar criminals, responsible for their acts. So it's not an unusual charge, and it's entirely possible that the office just sees this as well within its ambit, exactly the kind of thing that Manhattan does and the kind of prosecutions that Manhattan brings.
That's a really interesting point. And a lot of people have also commented on the notion that this is kind of an untested case, that there's not really a precedent for it. I'm wondering kind of how you think that factors in and what that could imply.
Again, I don't know whether it's unprecedented until I see the actual indictment. Bringing charges under the statute is not at all unprecedented. It's done all the time. And, in cases that seem quite similar to me, but there are some unique challenges that the factual situation, at least insofar as we understand it, involve in terms of, again, what would be that crime that the former president was seeking to commit or conceal. So, I think we need to wait and see about whether or not this is along the lines of what the Manhattan DA's office has done before or something novel. My guess is it's not testing new ground in a case like this, but of course we don't know until we actually see it.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't know until we see it tomorrow for sure. Just hearing from the U.S. Attorney, it was interesting. Michael Cohen's name obviously keeps coming up over and over again. I mean, he is the key witness here. Can you kind of remind us about, how much this case really hinges on his testimony?
Well, it really does. But the key question with a cooperator like him is, can you corroborate what he says? Because, in certain ways, it's just so clear from what he has done in the past and the ways in which he has acted and the things he has said about the former president that he may indeed have a motivation to lie here and that he doesn't hesitate about lying in the past. But that kind of thing is not as much of a hurdle as you might think for prosecutors, because all you need to do is convince the jury is that he's telling the truth about this one thing. And in order to do that, you need to corroborate a substantial amount of what he's saying and also kind of convey to the jury that this story is the more plausible of this. No other story really makes sense. And in this case, it is kind of hard to imagine what he would be doing, characterizing these payments as attorney's fees. Why would he be structuring it? In other words, why would he be paying it in increments and trying to make it look different than what it is if it weren't for the fact that he's trying to do something illicit? And if that's the more plausible story, it is, it's not that hard for jurors to think, well, this is a lying person who's not lying in this particular moment. So again, I think Michael Cohen as your key central witness is not ideal, but I also think that there are ways to get around the problems that it poses.
Rebecca Royfee, we are so grateful for your legal expertise, and we will find out more tomorrow and hopefully talk to you again about all of this when we know more. But thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And meanwhile, President Biden has yet to formally announce his own reelection bid, but we'll take you to the White House for some new reporting on when that might happen. You're streaming Red and Blue.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job?
I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgments of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
And welcome back to Red and Blue. While the intense spotlight focuses on the former president, the current president flew to Minnesota this afternoon and delivered remarks at a power plant on shoring up domestic supply chains. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now from the White House. Good to see you, Ed. So as you pointed out earlier, you had this really fascinating split screen of the current president in Minnesota and the former president landing in New York, preparing for his arraignment tomorrow. How is the White House, how is Biden handling this Trump news?
As if it's nothing out of the ordinary and it doesn't affect their jobs at all here at the White House. This White House currently very much in sort of the Rose Garden strategy mode, trying to keep the president looking presidential, sounding presidential, focused on issues of importance to the country and to the world. This visit today to Minnesota, one of several that he, the First Lady, the Vice President, other cabinet secretaries continue to make, and what they call around here the year of implementation. Not a terribly sexy term, but one basically designed to say, if you want to have trust in government, this is the year in which all the things we spent the first 2 years sort of focused on getting done and passed in Congress are actually getting implemented. The checks are going out the door. The shovels are going into the ground. The companies who stand to benefit from federal dollars are making investments that lead to more jobs. And at the end of it all, as the reelection continues next year, the hope is that he can turn and say, look at all these things we did and how they're helping you get a job, your neighbor get a job, the roads paved, the airport rebuilt, the climate cleaner, etc. And so what they've been up to over the last several weeks, what they will be up to in the coming weeks, is all designed to just continue to look as presidential and professional and above the fray as possible. And if they can continue to do that, they feel like they're in good shape going into next year when eventually a Republican opponent, whoever it is chosen, and they go to the voters to let them decide.
Yeah, and kind of demonstrating that contrast. I mean, you mentioned the reelection bid. You have some new reporting, I understand, surrounding about when that actually may happen. What do we know about Biden's timeline here?
First, we were told it would come around Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Then we were told it would come at some point after the State of the Union address. Then some suggested it would happen this week, the beginning of the second quarter of the year, when they could start a big fundraising push and take all that bottled up, pent up ambition and excitement among Democrats eager to get started and have millions of dollars start rolling in. Now, we're told early, maybe mid-summer, is when the president ultimately will make it official. And it's not so much a question of if at this point, just when. The calculation is there's no need for him to get in right now. He will not face a major Democratic Party official in some kind of a primary contest. There are nominal candidates running, but nobody that has the name ID or the ability to siphon off part of the party. And so the president knows he's got it, his and his alone. In this calendar year, the odd-numbered year, when you don't have a primary opponent, you don't need to be out there building an infrastructure. You just need to be raising money. And so at some point, a campaign apparatus will be established. The fundraising will begin. In the meantime, he has to make a series of decisions. When and where to announce, where to put this campaign's headquarters. Is it in Delaware? Is it in Philadelphia? Is it here in the Washington area? Who's the campaign manager who likely only focuses on the basics of hiring and logistics and schedules, not the broader strategic stuff that will be handled by some of his senior aides who work with him here in the West Wing? Where's the convention going to be held? Is it Atlanta, New York, or Chicago? Which of the super PACs that are out there or yet to be created are the ones that he can nominally bless as the ones that should handle certain aspects of the digital and television and radio advertising that needs to happen across the battleground states? And how much money will those groups be able to raise in order to do that? Something he doesn't have to worry about, but can sort of signal to the party, those are the ones you should be working with. And then how much money will he ultimately raise in order to get this campaign underway? One thing that's not in dispute anymore, and we should stop talking about based on conversations we've had, Vice President Harris will be there with him. The mentality is he's headed towards it, but there's absolutely no rush to do it. When the former president's being indicted tomorrow, when the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, who's allegedly the number 2, is still getting started, not even officially in the race yet, and apparently struggling based on the polls you may read. And while other Republicans are still toying with the idea of getting in, Democrats are happy to see him just sort of stand back and wait.
Yeah, Ed, I was actually thinking about that this morning because you have the indictment, obviously, and the arraignment coming down tomorrow, but you still have these 2 other major investigations that have yet to play out. So it makes sense, politically and logistically to let those play out on the Republican side. What would change for Biden once he does officially announce? Or will his schedule, kind of look the same, balancing these presidential trips and also kind of using them as campaign trips?
I suspect it's going to get a little more pronounced about when and how he's traveling and who exactly is traveling with him and who's paying for it all. We saw a good example of it a few weeks ago when he went west to California to make 2 stops and then to Las Vegas. There was a good mix of official events, some foreign policy, some discussion about gun control, and then some discussion about the future of Medicare and Social Security. And in the midst of that, he held 2 fundraisers that raised more than $2 million for the Democratic National Committee. Got some decent local press. The national press tagged along, and some of the things he said were mentioned on the evening news. That, to White House officials, is what they're looking for. That mix of political and official that leads to a mix of local and national coverage that makes him look presidential at a time when the Republicans are squabbling amongst themselves and maybe fighting over issues that are more important to the base than to the broader electorate. This is a White House focused on that broader electorate, knowing that they got the Democratic Party basically locked down. And it'll ultimately come down to a contest in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, maybe North Carolina. Did I say Wisconsin? Because that definitely is one. And might as well say it twice because they'd like to go there as often as they need to. They like to say it twice. And that's essentially where they'll go in order to get this done, believing that that's the way to get to 270.
All right, well, we will keep an eye on all of that. And as you say, too, still some time for others on the Republican side to announce as well. The year of implementation. Ed O'Keefe following that for us and the campaign to come. Thank you so much. And that does it for us today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money?
If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
An original documentary from